Welcome to the Rewild Gear Podcast. Modern life, society, and responsibilities have domesticated us. But now it's time to rediscover your adventurous side. Whether that's camping, hiking, hunting, fishing, or just spending time in the great outdoors, this is the podcast for you. Join us as we get back to the wilderness and rewild. Welcome to the Rewild Gear Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Spears, and I am here today with Mr. Dan Cerrillo. He is a retired Navy SEAL who spent 15 years leading people to safety in some of the most dangerous hotspots and war zones in the world, including Afghanistan, Iraq, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and other very high-risk locations. Some of Dan's roles in the SEALs included security specialist, breacher, sniper, counter-surveillance, and BUDS instructor. Dan medically retired in 2005 after suffering blast injuries during a hand-to-hand fight with an Qaida fighter in Sadr City, Iraq. And then since his retirement from the Navy, Dan has worked in executive security, protecting some of the biggest names in business today, including Paul Allen and Larry Page. He's the founder of Spartan 7 Adventure, an organization that teaches high net worth clients and organizations leadership, communication, offensive mindset, and advanced situational awareness skills developed by Navy SEALs. He is also the chief of staff for American Addiction Centers and leads their veteran treatment program, helping former military to break addiction cycles and to lead happy and productive lives. Along with that, Dan is also a husband and father and a board member for the Navy SEALs Fund and an ambassador for the Navy SEAL Foundation. He volunteers his free time coaching football at Lipscomb Academy near his home in Nashville, Tennessee. Dan, welcome to the Rewild Gear Podcast. So happy to have you.
Oh, thank you. Everything on there was correct except for one thing. I work for Sergey, Brin, not Larry Page.
Oh, I got the name wrong.
It's okay.
The wrong one. Sorry about that.
That's
Same
right.
difference though, right?
They used to have the shared security team until they split and separated, but yeah.
Gotcha. Super. Dan, I'd love to dig into your background a little bit and just kind of hear, your background story, how you ended up getting into the SEALs and, to where you are today.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a really funny journey. I give a speech every now and then. I tell people that I'm on one side of the Grand Canyon. On the other side of the Grand Canyon is a dartboard, and I threw a dart and I hit a bullseye. That's literally my life. I'm a very, very fortunate person. So I was very anti-military. My mom had, I don't know how to turn these things off. My mom was married to a few different military guys, and so we moved all over the place. And after, I can't even count how many moves. I mean, honestly, it was probably like 25 different moves. Dan's fun meter with the military was pegged. And so I went to high school, really rebellious, really focused on just playing sports, going to college, playing sports. And next thing I knew, I was at a Halloween party, massive fight, like anything. The night before that, my girlfriend took me to see the movie Navy SEALs. And the Monday morning, I was in the recruiter saying, I want to be a SEAL. So, yeah, shit, life has chances, right?
Yeah, it sure does. Where did you grow up, Dan?
So I grew up mostly I was born in Washington, grew up mostly in California, high school in Florida, and then a little bit of college in South Carolina.
Okay. So you've been all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, super. So the Navy SEALs, they have this reputation as being the best, the baddest, the elite military unit. What is one thing that, or maybe more than one thing, that a lot of people, they have this perception of the SEALs, but is either inaccurate or things that people don't know about it that would be helpful to just understand what it's like to be a SEAL?
I think the most inaccurate thing is everybody, did they drown you during BUDS? Did they drown you to make you become a SEAL? I'm like, no, they didn't drown you. They tried to, but the idea was to not drown, which makes you pass the test. So that's one accuracy. One thing that I don't think people realize about the teams is, in my day, it was very, very round table, right? So you had a boss, you had mid-level management, but essentially the more experience you got, the more you were invited into this circle of trust to make decisions. And that was the one thing that I'm trying to forecast this in the business world is SEALs are incredibly good decision makers and problem solvers under stress. And so, I have situations at work all the time where we went through a massive restructuring and people were kind of, very, very tense and terse. And everybody's like, you're just so calm. I'm like, well, I've been under this stress so many times. It's ridiculous. And you just got to solve problems. And the way we solve problems, the way that we learned in the SEAL teams relates to business so much is that we always used to talk about pizza. right?
Mhm.
And instead of, if you gobble the whole pizza up, it skews all over your face. And so we always talk about just eat one piece of pie, eat one bite of one piece of the pie, and then work your way around. And that's the one thing I think that people don't realize is how good we are at that, of micro fracturing decisions. Even though we can see a really big picture, I can still make a decision here that I know how it'll affect here, because that's kind of our planning process. We just what if everything, and like we plan from how we're going to put our gear on, all the way to how we're going to sit in the helicopter, how we're going to get out. You name it, there's a plan for it. And I think that not many people, when they start getting into a business plan, look at every variable along the way. They just kind of look at big picture, they look at the starting point, they look at midpoint, endpoint. It's like, well, there's so many start, finish, start, mid, end points in there that you just got to break them up and fragment them,
Yeah.
and then be able to see the big picture the whole time,
Yeah. And so that's really affected your business career as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've been able to have a good amount of success in a very short time. A lot of failure in the beginning too. Like, so I'm like, oh, he just worked. I had my own businesses. I did very well in the beginning, and then they did not do very well. That was totally on me. That's something I've learned. Accountability is something we talk about, but I never had to be accountable because nothing ever went wrong until it went wrong. And so
Mm.
as I've applied that now into business and really start looking at the why, constantly looking at the why, looking at the how, it's really affected how I am able to make decisions, how I'm able to mentor people. A lot of people say leadership. I don't say leadership, it's mentoring. How do I find my replacement? And by finding my replacement, I'm helping those people get better at what they do. And my entire job is, how do I make their lives easier? What can I do to make it? What decisions and what things that I can do and put in place to make their lives better? And that's in the teams. That's the one thing that we just do very well. You always are helping somebody.
Got it. Yeah.
All the way from buds. Like, you're judged in buds. If you're a fast runner, I was a pretty fast runner back when I was about 100 pounds ago. You finish the run, you turn back around, right? You turn back around, you go to the last man, and you run back across the line with him, and you're kind of judged in that. And that's something I pride myself in. I pride myself in eating last, let my people eat first, getting raises for my people before I think about myself, and that's just something I learned from the teams.
There's this concept of servant leadership, and that sounds very much kind of that mentality.
It is, and the thing is a lot of how do I make sure I say it? Well, I won't even be political about it. A lot of people are completely full of crap when they talk about it. They talk about it, they write books about it, but they don't actually do it. And I'm here to tell you, I've worked with a lot of leaders and big business leaders. I'm working with one of the biggest hotel owners in the world right now. I'm helping him build a security team, and I'm literally at this point ready to walk away from him. I'm just like, you're not a nice person, and you talk a great game. He wrote a great book, but from my opinion, he ain't doing any of it. And I'm at a point where my personal business, I don't need him to be successful. And I don't want to be around somebody like that, So that's the one thing. If people are going to read those books, really read into who wrote it, and if they actually practice what they preach.
So that what you're seeing is a discrepancy between what they're saying and what they're doing.
Yeah, I see it a lot. I'm in that world now. I know who the guys who write the books are. I know who the guys who are giving the speeches, and I also know the flip side of who some of them actually are. And it's difficult. I will never name names. But I don't bite my tongue about it. But the great thing about it for me is it causes me to look at myself and really look in the mirror and go, okay, am I doing that? Am I starting to bite in that realm? And that's the reason, I don't have a podcast. I don't write books. It's because I know I have a lot of faults, and who am I to start telling people what to do,
Sure. Yeah. Self-reflection is so important.
Yeah, I wasn't good at it for a long time, and now it's something that I pride myself in. I was forced to do it. I was forced to really look at myself from the outside in. My wife, we had a lot of struggles when she was sick, and I didn't do well while she was sick. I consider myself a coward during it, and when she got better, I went and got myself better. And doing that made me really start looking at myself, going, okay, these are the things you did wrong, and every day focus on one thing and try to fix one thing.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of directions we could go here with this, and I'd like to hear more about your story about when she was sick, when you were sick, and I've heard a little bit about it, but I'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth, if you will.
Yeah. So my SEAL career is one that I'm just so lucky. I got to be the first at doing so many things. Things that were just I look at now, I'm like, holy crap, man! I'm glad I'm alive. Two, I can't believe we pulled that off. And during that entire process, I really overlooked my wife. Like my wife was there. My wife was the mother of my kids, but I never really understood the value of what she actually was. And I want to make sure I'm very honest with this because I own this completely. Uh, we were partners, we were husband and wife, but I wouldn't really say that I was as committed to her as I was to the SEAL teams. Right? If
Mm.
the boys called, I went out, and you kind of go through that process. And then when I had lost a lot of friends, a lot of funerals during that process, I never really ever understood how that affected me, but how it really affected my wife because all those guys came to my
Yeah.
house. My wife was a realtor. She pretty much bought houses for almost every SEAL on the West Coast. She spent a significant amount of time with them. So she knew them, she knew their wives, she knew their kids. And when those guys died, I never really looked at that and said, how is she feeling? I just knew what I was feeling. And so when she got sick, it was the first time ever I was like, holy crap, if she dies, I'm literally like, I don't even know where the bank account numbers are. And I don't even know what my kids' school schedules are. I don't know. I'm clueless. And what I really found out during that process was how much I loved her and how little I could do to help her. And so I broke. I started drinking. I drank to a level that was just bad, And when she finished chemo, finished radiation, all that other stuff, I was just in a really, really bad place. And I was in the flip side was this is why I work in addiction now is nobody knew.
Mm.
Like nobody had a clue that I was in the position I was. Nobody had a clue that I went home every night and drank until 2, 3 in the morning, woke up at 6, worked all day. And as soon as work was over, I'd start again. And I always told myself, you're not an alcoholic unless you drink on Mondays. And then next thing you know, you're drinking on Mondays. And then I would convince myself, you're not an alcoholic unless you drink at work. Next thing you know, you're at work and your hands are shaking. You're thinking about drinking.
Wow.
And I just got lucky. I had another SEAL. He went through an experimental program. When he told his story, but when his wife told her story about him, man, you talk about a baseball bat to the side of the head. I came home and I asked my wife, I'm like, am I like this? And she's very honest with me. And it really made me look in the mirror for probably the first time in my life and go and get help, get therapy, take an experimental medication. It was crazy. And I had an awakening to a new life of peace and happiness. And I've never drank a drop of alcohol since. And I've found out that my wife is the only person in my life who's ever truly loved me.
Yeah.
And I've done my part now. I'm doing my part. I shouldn't say I've done it to really repair what I feel like I didn't do for the last 20 years. I mean, the last 2.5 years, we've just had a tremendous marriage. But I think for 20 years prior to that, I wouldn't consider myself a good husband. I would consider myself a good father, but not a good husband.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And especially, what were some of the steps that you took to kind of repair the relationship after not having done some of those things or being there the way that you needed to show up for her?
Complete and total honesty. That started just. I understand. I mean, because at that point, I think we were this close to getting divorced, and completely me. Like I was just. I was. I was in a bad place, and I came clean. I told her everything was bothering me. I never really was one of those guys who ever talked. Like I never was like, "Hey, this bothers me," and it was the first time ever that I really had an emotional outlet about all my. Because when the helicopter got shot down, Rob Reeves, Jonas Kelso, Heath, JT. I mean, all those dudes are my friends, and I cried for one day. And I was like, okay, I'm crying for one day. Okay, no more. You just hardened up, backpack, and then after that is when I really let it out and in front of her and told her just where I was. And it wasn't, the fact of losing them is I think that during my SEAL career, I had a fascination that I wanted to die in battle, this glorious in a pile of brass. And I felt like a quitter. I just felt like I let people down. And during this, it was about a 2.5 month process of almost every day, just kind of wanting her to know that I was really trying to be a different person. Opening the door, throwing the trash, all these things that I had never just really you kind of do it in jest, but I never really did it, like doing the dishes, making the bed, doing laundry. And, you know, I think every day she was waiting for me to revert back to who I used to be. And, it was a long process of her accepting me back into her life. So, and to this day, that's my focus is I literally, everything I do is I try to do knowing that I'm doing this for her, because she's just a saint. I mean, to be with me, like, holy crap, she is an absolute angel and a saint. She's just the most kind-hearted person. You would not believe when you meet her that her husband's a freaking rootin' tootin' frogman.
Got it. Yeah. Well, it sounds like she's an amazing woman.
Yeah, she's good. She's good.
That's fantastic. Dan, I'd like to dig into a little bit about Spartan 7 Adventures. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that, how you got started doing that. And
Yeah, so it's funny. I think almost everything that I do starts by accident. So I had this guy named Brian. Yeah, seriously. Like working out. When I open my gyms, start there because it all starts from there. Is I got kicked out of 24-hour fitness for doing CrossFit. Right, so CrossFit was this big thing. My wife and I were there doing CrossFit. My son came in, and we're all. My son is a beast. All my kids are beasts, right? My oldest son was doing it with us, and this trainer comes over. He's like, "Hey, you can't be training people here." I'm like, "Not training anybody. This is my wife." And he's like, "Well, what about him?" Like totally rude, right? And I'm like, "It's my son." He goes, "Well, you still can't be doing it." And so it really made me mad, right? And I was a pretty angry dude back then.
sure.
And I let him know how I felt about him and what I wanted to do with a 50-pound dumbbell. And of course, I was shown the door. So I had to go buy my own weight set. And so that started me down this venture. Anyway, long story short, open gyms. And a guy walked in my gym one day and he said, I want to go on this sheep hunt. I didn't know what a sheep hunt was. I had no idea what it cost. I want to get in shape. And he and I formed a relationship. And then he started talking about all these hunting trips that he does, these really obscure places. And he's like, I would love for you to train me to survive and how to use a weapon, et cetera. And I'm like, I can't do that in a day. We can't just go to the range. I can't just spend a day. I need like 10 days. So I formed a company called Turning Steel, literally around Brian Valentine. And Brian is a big time Microsoft guy back in the day. And we used his ranch in Montana. He let me bring, clients from the gym there. And for 10 days, we played Frogman. So we got there on Friday night. We trained all the way to the next Sunday. And during that training, we went through land warfare. We went through close quarters battle. We went through combat medicine, land navigation, you name what I could throw at them. And by the end, they were doing missions and everything. I threw it at them. And that was created by Turning Steel. I was Turning Steel, that company. And I sold that company. And I got bored. And people kept calling me saying, we want to do that adventure again. And I had learned a lot of knowing that 10 days away for an executive is hard. So I just started thinking, okay, let's focus on weekends. Let's focus on what I think people can learn in a weekend. And what I really didn't want to do is get back into tactics. Because everybody talks tactics in my world, right? And I'm like, okay, I can't teach Seth what I know about tactics in a weekend. Nor can I teach him in 10 days. I can show him. So how do I get Seth, the 40-year-old businessman who's wondering, hey, I'm 40, I'm a big-time business guy, I'm a great executive, but I wonder what it would have been like to be a SEAL. Mm-hmm. And I basically said, let's create adventures. Let's dress up the way we do. Let's use the same training facilities. Let's train as hard as we can, as safe as we can. In modalities like shooting, we're going to shoot. But like CQB, we're not gonna do live fire. We'll do UTMs, we'll do simunition, we'll even do airsoft if we had to. But I could teach there. But I don't really care if they screw up. Right. So I'm not going to hammer tactics. I'm like, hey, let's have fun. Let's work on teamwork, and communication, leadership, etc. And so Spartan 7 was born from there. And through that, I started understanding what adventures clients really liked and which ones they didn't like. Adventures that I wanted to do and I thought would be great, they just didn't like. And then the ones that I was like, this is so boring, it's so easy, they loved them. And so, like right now, we posted our shooting adventure online yesterday, and today we've sold 11. And that's there's no media. It's literally on a website, a link, and just an email out to the client base saying we're doing one adventure this summer. And most of Spartan 7 is private. So most of our courses are bought by a private group. So we've never really had to go market or anything. And I've narrowed the adventures down to what I think clients will enjoy. And so this year we did helicopter hog hunting. We did a race car driving, executive protection driving / Carlos the Jackal mission. So went to Bondurant Speedway in Phoenix, raced the cars one day, executive protection, crashing the cars the second day, and then the whole time they're learning how to gather intel to go capture Carlos Jackal.
Hmm.
And so at the very end of that weekend, a full-on scenario, police involved, you name it, chasing people to the cities, capturing them, interrogating them capturing Carlos, extracting Carlos, and then the final, them rescuing their own teammates.
Cool.
And it was great. And then this summer, we're going to go do the shooting adventure in Shaw's. So Shaw's closed to the public, probably the greatest shooting facility in the world. And just imagine if you had $20 million and you were going to build everything you did build was going to move, twist, snap, shoot, still situation. And the fact that you don't got a bunch of yahoos there. In order to get there, you got to come with me. It's, the only people that train there are special operations guys and elite law enforcement units. And so I'm able to take my clients there because a part of Spartan 7, because of what I'm able to do in business and the security side in my full-time job, the money we make from Spartan 7, a lot of that money we donate. So we donate to Navy SEAL Fund, we donate to Big Fish Foundation, and my instructors get paid. And but it's not. It used to be a profit entity, and I kind of got made myself miserable trying to do a lot of courses. And so now I do a few courses. The profit is much higher, and we're able to donate a lot of money. Last year, I was the most significant donation I made all in my life, and it made me very, very happy. And that's the direction I want to go with Spartan 7.
Yeah, cool.
And our final event of the year, we're going to Jail Bar Ranch, which is just another exclusive high-end facility in Texas. Beautiful. I mean, like 7-star ranch in Texas. And we're going to go there and bring some of the most awesome guest speakers I can bring, and then go shoot guns and ride horses and just have a hoot of a time,
Sounds amazing. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the different adventures. You had said that the ones that you wanted to do weren't necessarily the ones that that the clients wanted, and vice versa. So I'd like to hear kind of the ones that you're most interested in, and then the ones that they seem to be most interested in.
Yeah, so one of the ones that I thought the clients would just do backflips over was a skydiving adventure. And so, we went to San Diego. The whole idea was to skydive in, go do a mission, etc. And the first day would be all jumping, 3 or 4 jumps in the day, and then the next day do a jump into a CQB mission, etc. And we did it. We had fun, and I was like, "Okay, let's do it again." And nobody raised their hands. And essentially, they were like, "Dan, we know you like jumping. We jumped, and we're cool." So they did not want to go jump again. None of them had the fire. One guy had a little fire. He was talking about it. He never has gone and done it again. And I realized that I actually don't like jumping. I did it, but I have fun when I'm doing it. I just thought more people would want that. That'd be more something they wanted. And that was not what they really wanted, right? The next one was I wanted to do a waterman adventure. And so we had a yacht, and we were going to go do shipboarding and, swim in the yacht. And I kind of got deaf ears on that one. Like, well, how far are we going to swim? I don't know, a couple hundred meters. And that was like asking people to climb Mount Everest without freaking oxygen. Like, you want me to swim in the night in the ocean almost half a mile? I'm like, yeah, what's the big deal? Like, I'm not doing it. So that would never get off the ground. And so far, the ones they love, we go to San Diego. We do I basically call it a home defense course. It's really a CQB adventure. And during that time, I'll teach team CQB, close quarters battle and combat. And then I'll also teach individual clearance through the house from an executive protection side, but really giving them the tools to defend themselves in their own home. That's wildfire. We can sell that thing out in like 20 minutes, right? And the facility's beautiful. San Diego, easy to sell San Diego.
Sure.
My favorite one is Bull Hill Ranch up in Washington, which is where Naval Special Warfare takes their snipers. So we rent out a portion of the ranch, and we take our guys up there, and we do a long range shooting adventure, and also horseback riding. During the horseback, so I'll go out there, and it's called mill it and kill it. So you actually have to find the target first, then you have to measure the target, do a calculation, which we teach them on a calculator how to get exactly the distance. Then they have to fire their shot. And so they do that all in practice for one day. The next day, they're actually doing it. Essentially, if we catch them doing it, then they're busted. And of course, we catch them, but we give them a lot of tools of how to be sneaky, peeky, use dead space, et cetera. And they really love that. I love it because the mountains of Washington are beautiful, and they love it because you're out. Your phones don't work. You're just in nature, and that's the happiest when I'm when I'm away from the stupid phone and I'm just in nature, just looking at the beauty of God created,
Yeah, I hear that.
That's the part of the SEAL teams that I loved.
Got it. Tell me more about that. Our company, our mission is to get people back into the great outdoors and spend more time with family and friends, and reconnect with nature, with the natural world, and get away from technology, because we're surrounded by it day to day. So I'd love to hear more about your love of nature and why that's so important to you.
It's funny is I don't know where my love of nature came from. I just knew that as a SEAL, I was a terrible admin SEAL. So you put me around the compound, I was going to get in trouble, right? Like it's just a matter of time. But as soon as we got in the field, I just became like, I felt like a SEAL, right? Like I have a lot of weight on my back. We're going to move all night long. We're going to lay up all day long. We're going to sit quietly. We're not going to talk. And you're just going to observe your surroundings. And I found that to be so beautiful and peaceful that even after I left the SEAL teams, part of my recovery, because when I got hit, it broke me up pretty good. Part of my recovery was picking one event per year and just training as hard as I could to get to that event. And each one of those events was outdoors, right? Bataan Death March, Coeur d'Alene Ironman, Ultra Swims, something that was hard. That was going to force me to train, but at the same time, just I get out there and I just felt like a frogman again. And to this day, when I go to places where I love going to Montana, I was just in Idaho a couple weeks ago. My buddy Matt Bissonette, he wrote a book called Only Easy Day. So Matt and I were out there shooting gophers, right? So, and we probably said 10 words, and just being out in that beautiful environment, just so soothing to me, especially now because I am, attached to this stupid thing. It never stops. And getting away from that and just being able to hang out with my bros and do something that I think I'm really good at, which is I'm a good shot. And just there's something beautiful if you can take a step back and look at the surroundings of nature around you. There's just something very tranquil and beautiful if you allow yourself to see it. And that always brings me back to zero. All right. When I need to break, like I love mowing my lawn. Right. I can hire gardeners, right? Whatever, but I actually enjoy mowing my lawn. And it's an hour of that just silence, of just mowing the lawn, tranquility. I have a beautiful yard. My house is right on the river. And I just, something about being out there really just calms me down.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. How did this love of nature and being outdoors, how did that affect your recovery, both after being injured and then when you were recovering from addiction? And did that play into that at all on the health side?
Yeah, I've always judged my recovery. I had a stroke here Thanksgiving this year, and so I've always judged my
Oh, wow.
recovery on what I'm able to do outdoors. Right, like I can go in the weight room, I can pump pig, whatever. That's easy, but that's anybody can do that. Like I like to do things that are long and hard, and so like I want to get on my bike and I want to ride for 100 miles, but I don't get to go ride 100 miles consistently. So it's just a gut fest. I go, yeah, I'm going to go, and it's going to suck, and it's going to hurt, and I'm weigh 240, and fat people don't usually ride bikes, but this one does. And during that time, on the flat ground, all the skinny people pass me, and as soon as we hit a hill, I pass them. And in those moments,
Mm,
I'm looking around and I'm like, dear Lord, thank you for giving me the ability to do this and to just be out, have the wind, the sun, raining. I enjoy rain, right? I lived in Seattle forever. And it makes me feel good. And so that's how I know when I've suffered a lot of injuries. Each time that I recover, it literally starts with a walk. Like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk. After my stroke, it's about 460 meters around my neighborhood. It took me an hour and a half. I had to sit down, and it was brutal, crying, I've never been in that position before, but that's how I judge how Dan is doing, is to go do something hard, do something that may not be hard for some people, but for me, after a stroke, just trying to walk was hard. And,
yeah.
okay, it took me an hour and a half yesterday. I'm going to do it an hour and 20 today. I'm going to do an hour and 10 until okay, now I'm going to go run it. Okay. Now I'm going to sprint it. Now I'm going to, and I can't do that inside because I just don't have that. I can't be on a treadmill. It just kills me. But the only machine that I can use that I really can is a Versa climber, which is like $5,000, so it's kind of hard to find them. But
Yeah.
outdoors, man, I just love it. I feel good. It makes me feel happy, and yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say your most memorable outdoor adventure or experience has been? And that could be either as a civilian or in the military. Maybe one of both.
I would say in the military, up in Mosul, Iraq, and we weren't walking. We just done a mission in a city called Tel Afar, and it was kind of crazy at night. I just remember driving back that morning, and everybody thinks Mosul is like a desert. Well, it's not. It's really beautiful, right? There's rolling hills, green grass, and it had snowed. And there's snow on the top of the hills, and we're rolling this convoy. 7 vehicle convoy. We had just been in it all night long in Tel Afar, and I remember just driving back and like, one, I'm happy to be alive, but two, holy shit, it's really pretty. There's in we have these big peltors, so it silences out the noise from the Humvees. And I always like put a little Walkman in there, and I would just listen to classical music. And I just remember sitting there listening to classical music, going, "I'm right where I want to be, and I'm surrounded by the people that I want to be surrounded by." So that was a big one from the war. It's just this very small respite of, we just went through the most ridiculous nonsense last night. What could go wrong went wrong. We nearly got killed 100 times, and now we're driving down this road. Hopefully, don't get IED'd on this road, but it's just beautiful. And so, in the civilian life, I think the most memorable one was the Coeur d'Alene Ironman. That morning we started. It was cold. The water was really choppy, and my arms are so big I can't wear a sleeved wetsuit when I swim, so I have to wear a shorty. And so that water was cold, man. I'm not kidding you. So the first lap, Dan was like, "Oh man." That's like the second lap. I got warmed up and I was in the groove, and I was just swimming in a school of fish. And then I got on the bike, and you're up in the mountains outside Coeur d'Alene. It was just beautiful, right? Just beautiful. And then you get on the run, and I'm on the run, and you're running right next to the lake. It just, in the city crowds, people are partying, right? But as soon as you get away from them around the lake, I'm sitting there and like, man, thank you, God. Like, thank you for giving me the ability to do this, and just in this beautiful environment, surrounded by other people who are just working so hard and for no recognition whatsoever. They're just here to work, and they're here to surprise people. If you ever get a chance to go see an Ironman, to see the type of people, don't go in the first 8 hours to see all the super fit people cross. Go at like at 10 o'clock at night when guys like me cross. I got passed by a lady. I'm not kidding you. She was as big as my desk and about as tall. And she passed me on that run like I was standing still. And she's laughing and giggling. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm a frog man. And I just got passed by a 50-year-old housewife who's like 5'2" with like 70-inch hips. And I loved it. I was just like, oh my God, what an amazing woman. What an amazing human being. That's the thing that I'm in awe of, right? My daughter being in the circus and everything like that, just seeing what a human body can do. The amazing ability of a human athlete is just something that awe inspires me when I'm around really good people. I have a guy, the CEO I work for, Andrew McWilliams. Being in a room with Andrew, I just sit there. I'm like, you are brilliant, and you're humble, and you're nice, and you're such a good human being. And he and I go for walks. We'll just take a walk around the building, just kind of get away. And I'm his chief of staff, but it's just like, it's kind of, those things come into full circle when you're outdoors or when you're indoors. And I just love beautiful things now, and I love beautiful environments, beautiful people. And when I need to get away, I get outdoors. It's funny, I'm in my office, right? And so my office used to be configured this way, but in order for me to look out the window, I had to turn my head. So I moved my entire office. There's a door behind me, which I don't care about. I just closed it, right? Because I want to look out my windows. And I want to look out into my neighborhood, my front yard, and there's deer. We have coyotes. I try to kill the coyotes as much as I can, obviously, but but it's cool, So I just like looking out, and yeah, I'm fortunate,
Oh, that's amazing. What would you say the biggest life lesson is that you've learned that nature and the outdoors, and probably, obviously your experience within the SEALs What's the biggest lesson that you learned through all of that?
Be kind to everything if possible, right? I learned that my buddy Chris Smith, and Chris Smith he's going to be one day he's going to be a very famous person, right? So Chris is the most eloquent speaker I've ever heard in my life. Highly educated, great SEAL career, great government career. I can't really say what he did for work, but amazing career. And he's starting to speak about it. But Chris told me something one time. He's like, make 7 people smile per day, right? And what I discovered, what Chris was trying to say was, don't be a jerk, right? And if you really go about your day trying to make people smile, it's impossible to be a jerk. Like having a face like this, right? This takes effort. And this is the way my face was for 20 years. Pissed off, stay away from me. And I used to make jokes about it on Instagram, right? Sunglasses on, headphones on, asshole mode in full effect. Pardon my language, right? And because I didn't want anybody around me, I wanted people to stay away from me. And now I don't do that. And what I found is by softening the way I want to live my life now, and instead of like people like, hey, you want to go hunting? I honestly don't want to go hunting right now. Coyotes are different because coyotes broke my dog's back, so we have a little personal history with each other. So that's different, right? Ground squirrels are different. Gophers, we have those are not beautiful to me. But deer and elk and animals in nature are pretty. They're beautiful to me. I don't have a desire to kill them. And one, it's too easy. It's not like I'm going to miss, right? I mean, maybe with a spear, that'd be a challenge. But if I'm hungry, I just go to the store, right? And I don't have anything against hunting. I used to take big time hunters
Sure.
on hunts, and I would film the hunts. I don't have a desire to do it, right? I like looking at the animals. I like looking at nature. I just like beautifying my life. And for the first time ever, being very cognizant of trying to make it even better and make other people around me's lives better. And that's the biggest lesson that I learned the hard way, was that if you are miserable and you exude misery, don't wonder why everything around you sucks, right? And I learned that the hard way, of knowing that I created these amazing gyms. Like my CrossFit gym in Seattle was probably one of the biggest in the world and incredibly successful. And at the end of it, I know exactly what happened. It wasn't because, back then it was like, oh, this and that. It wasn't that. It was me. And I walked around with a chip on my shoulder. I was pissed off at the world. I expected everybody to be able to be the decision maker, problem solver that I was. And I would get mad when they couldn't do it, instead of understanding the capabilities of some human beings. I was trained to a very high level, and I have a capability of solving very, very unique problems fast under stress. Not everybody has that. And it caused me to be just a jerk. And I look at that now as probably the greatest thing that I ever learned in my life was what not to do. And that's the lesson that I really try to envelop and embrace, is how I used to be and how I want to be. And I believe in change in human beings. Like some people are like, oh, 10 years ago, he did this. Okay, great. I get it. But people can change if you allow them to, but they have to change themselves. And for me, the greatest lesson I learned was try to make 7 people smile.
I love that. That's a fantastic quote.
Yeah. And I'm living proof of it, because back then I worked really hard to try to get what I had. I mean, I break my nails trying to work. Now I feel like I'm not hardly working, and we're just incredibly successful. And I look at that and I'm like, why? I'm a really deep why guy. And I'm like, maybe it's because I'm actually trying to be a nice person.
That's great advice. When I was, I think, 17, I was at a business event, and there was a guy there who was really successful, and took me for a ride in his brand new 1996 Porsche 911 twin turbo. And it was like the nicest car I had ever been in. And it was a humbling experience seeing somebody super successful that's just going to take this kid in his car and show it to him. And something he said has struck me to this day, is that every day, do something to affect someone's life in a positive way. And unfortunately, I often forget that on a daily basis. But every time I think about it, I'm like, oh, that's such great advice. Really need to focus on that more.
Yeah, that's something that, I make it a very big point to not allow the stimuli to affect the event. And what I mean by that is, like, I used to have really bad road rage, right? I mean, I was that guy who chased you home, right? So guilty. Um, And now I think people's natural reaction is somebody cuts you off in traffic, you give them the bird, you scream at them, whatever, right? I don't. I just sit there. I'm like, they should have left earlier. Their problems aren't my problems. I listen to classical music or country music when I drive. I set my cruise control at 75, and I keep telling myself, you're in no rush. You're in no rush. And the flip side of that is I could be that guy flipping people off, cutting people off in traffic, weaving through. The road belongs to me. By me not doing that, I'm trying to help people in my own way of saying, I'm just going to get out of your way. You are in a mindset that you're selfish and you're self-important. And instead of me fueling your fire to make you angrier, you win. You can weave through traffic. You can cut me off. You're not going to get any reaction from me. But go about your business. And by doing that, I feel like I've done something good for them by not, allowing them to affect me. And the other things too, just asking people, like when you're at a waiter, like how was your day? Like when something like I'll take an iced tea. Okay. Hey, by the way, how was your day? Like tell me about your day.
Mm-hmm.
And it lights people up, man.
Yeah, that's great. And that can definitely be a challenge to do. The road rage side, living in Nashville, I was there from 2005 to 2010, and every time I'm back, it seems like the driving has gotten even worse. So
Really, dude, I was just in Tampa. Like now, I think Nashville is the tamest city I've ever
oh
lived in.
man,
So you gotta remember, I lived in Silicon Valley. I've lived everywhere,
yeah,
right? I come to Nashville, and like I've hit one traffic jam ever, and it was like 5 minutes long, which is not a traffic jam. People are wave at you, and here in Nashville, like I have a veteran license plate, and my son has a Purple Heart one, obviously, but and people like wave at you and stuff like that. I'm like, they're just the nicest people in the world. So I've been a few times, but not as bad as LA.
yeah. My experience isn't that people aren't friendly. It's just that they don't pay attention. Like as far as pulling out in front of you and not using turn signals and just like cruising in the passing lane and things
Yes, that's
basic driving considerations there.
yes. I guess me being living in Seattle for 15 years, none of that even like Seattle. You want to talk about crap drivers?
Yeah,
Go to Seattle.
got it. Dan, what is an adventurous experience that you've had that you would never want to repeat, and why?
Oh.
And I'm guessing you've got multiple ones as a SEAL.
Yeah, I've had some. I've had some very, very scary moments. Let me think of a good one. I think probably the one I would never wish on anybody is I got entangled in a parachute with my buddy Jeff DeClerc, and he's gone now. God rest his soul. He's a very good friend of mine. And that experience, because it was so slow, right? We got wrapped and then we started spinning very slowly, speeding up. And normally when you're wrapped, it's pretty easy, but we had full combat equipment on. And so we're really we're like, oh, okay. We had plenty of time until we didn't have plenty of time. But I just remember that whole way as we're starting to spin faster and faster and faster, and we're losing altitude. I'm like, you can see your death coming. I've had other moments where
Wow.
there's death right there, but it's like that, right? This one was I'm watching it come, and I could cut away, but now I'm like at 1,000 feet. I cut this thing away. I hope this other one opens in time. And so you're sitting there, and I'm looking up. I'm like, we got one good shoot. You're making decisions like we're going to hit really hard, but I think the option is to hit faster if this other chute doesn't open, or just hit really, really hard with this chute that is open. The two of us under full combat equipment, and we're already at the limits of of the parachute anyway. Because like back in the teams, I walked around about 225. Jeff walked around about 230. We're jacked. Now you got 300 pounds of gear on too. The ruck is 100 some odd pounds. Wow. All your ammo. You're like a little waddle man. You don't jump out of a plane with that kind of equipment. You just fall out, right? And you're making these decisions. And you're just sitting here like, holy shit, And Jeff and I are talking. We're communicating, and right before we hit the ground, I'd say maybe 100 feet before we hit the ground. The great thing about Jeff was he had this immense hand strength. And the guy could stop on a fast rope. And if you ever talk to military guys, Jeff could stop on a fast rope, which I cannot. That is not part of Dan's story, right? Jeff could actually stop. Well, Jeff grabbed all the lines in front of him, and he's kind of on his back like this in the lines. and he rolled himself out, full combat equipment, and the chutes went poof, bam, and we hit the ground. And, it knocked us both out. And I remember when I came to, I could hear tick, 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 tick. And I'm like, I turned my head and my watch had gotten, my other watch had gotten ripped off my arm. It's laying right here. I'm like, oh, my watch made it to heaven. Right. I'm like, okay. So I'm laying there and it's beautiful rolling, yellow grass. I remember like, okay, I guess this is it. I guess I'm here, like I remember sitting up and just beautiful rolling hills. And all of a sudden I look next to me and Jeff sits up, about 20 feet away from me, and he starts cussing at me. And I'm like, man, I gotta be in heaven with this guy. And then, then I could hear people, all the guys came running. They saw it happen. So they already started running towards us. But it was just that experience I would not want anybody to ever go through, because it's one thing, like when I got blown up, it was fast, right? I've been in vehicle wrecks, et cetera. They're fast. This was not fast. And the outcome was, this is going to hurt, man. And I'm probably not going to live through this. And that's kind of what your brain is going through. And that was probably one of the, I've had 2 times in my SEAL career where I've really just been scared. I'm scared. And that was one of them.
Wow. You hear this concept of people talking about like a near-death experience and like their life just flashing before their eyes. Curious as far as if you had any experience like that with this, and like what your thought process was.
In that moment, it was, I didn't have kids. I wasn't married back then. So I don't think there was a defining like, oh man, all this is going to happen. It was just kind of like, all right, whatever, this sucks. I think that when I had that experience was when I got blown up. Everything was going wrong. We was a time sensitive target. And, up till that point, I had been compromised on 5 different missions and gotten in hand-to-hand fights in the doorways. I was putting the charge on, right? And so that night, Jay Schmidt was the A breacher. And so I was the B breacher. And I was like, okay, good. Every night we flipped off and we were doing so many missions. And so I remember that night he went over and bump, he stepped on these 55-gallon drums and he got to the door, and all of a sudden you heard the commotion. And I could hear him like, he's open. And I could hear the scuffling, whatever. And I started laughing. And it's pretty bad for me to say that, but I'm like, finally, dude, like better you than me. That's kind of my feeling. And Jay's big, so I knew he was fine. And it's going to take us 5 seconds to get to him. And I think I was like the number 6 guy through the door, so number 8 guy through the door. And we were in the fight, and we just, a SEAL element coming through your door, good luck. Good luck.
Yeah.
That's really and that's the way I coach football. Good luck. Let's go. Right. And so I remember going to that room and just seeing the fighting. There's 3 hand-to-hand fights going on. There's a gunfight in the back. There's chaos. And we went through there and we did our thing, and it was over quickly. And I remember just sitting there like, whoo, and I'm kind of chuckling, like, ooh, better you than me, Jay. And over the radio, hey guys, good job. You're in the wrong house.
Uh-huh.
And by this point, almost every time we were in the wrong house, right? And, I got mad. And they're like, hey, it's the house next door. So we're in a 1-story house. We just fought 4 guys. And next door is a 3-story mansion. I'm like, how do you screw this one up? And so I'm pissed. And Andrew Ledford pulled him. I'm mad. And he's like, dude, calm down. Get the team together and go. And I'm like, roger that. Go over the wall. So all this trash is in the yard. So I fall a couple times. I go up to the door. I put the charge in the door, and in front of me is this big, massive window. So I'm trying to stand to this window and put the charge on. I wheel back the charge a few feet, and the fucking charge falls off the door.
No.
Like, and Mark Carter, he's gone now too. He was my point man. And Mark just looks at me and just shakes his head, right? I'm like, dude. So I go back to the door and put the charge on. You got to remember back then I could get this charge blown by 8 seconds, right? That was fast. And so I put the charge in the door, and it fell off a 3rd time, a 2nd time, right? And so I'm sitting there, and thank God it did, because when I picked it up the next time, I looked to my right, and there's this round cylinder sitting there. And I'm like, that looks like an acetylene tank. And it's pitch black, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, that's an acetylene tank. and I have a main charge, and a main charge is a big charge. I'm like, I just tossed it out in the yard. So I grabbed a secondary charge, interior door charge, a really small charge, and I put that on the door. And I'm like, okay, it may not open this door because it's a steel door, but hopefully it'll damage it enough where I can boot it in. So get back, wheel the and the no-nail is like a straw. It's like just a long straw. It's a flash tube, right? And get back to the set point, and remember this window's right here, so I'm trying to get everybody below the window. And we call it turning steel. So turning steel, I'm rolling my safety, my final safety on my firing device. I call it turning steel, and I put my hand on Mark's head to put Mark's head down because I knew this glass was going to blow out on us. I put my hand on Mark's head down, and I look up, and there's a dude staring at me. And I'm like, kind of like, well, remember, I just put my point man's head down. Now I call turning steel. Everybody's got their eyes at the ground. And I remember just like, open! And I just charged. This was the beginning of the war. Later on in the war, I was just blowing the charge on him, This is the beginning, I couldn't tell if it was a kid or man. I just saw him move and I charged. So it wasn't like I was being a hero or anything. And I got to him in the doorway. We started going at each other. And I think what happened is I was trying to hold a device against my chest. I think what happened is the rest of the guys might have bumped into me, because that's the next thing I remember was poof, this bright white light. And that was it.
Whoa.
And so I was gone, I was out. And then when I woke up, I had Justin Legg grab me by the night vision. He goes, he's dead. And my head hit back down. And I could feel the guys stepping over me. And I could hear, they're fighting out in the street right now. It's kind of chaos, right? And I just remember laying there going, but I'm not dead. Right? I'm not dead. And I remember just like, man, I hurt. Like I'm in a lot of pain right now. And I could feel somebody underneath me. And so I'm feeling, and I'm like, oh shit, I killed Mark. Right? And I'm feeling, I'm like, when did Mark grow a beard? Like,
quick.
I don't remember Mark growing a beard, but okay. Then I'm like, oh shit, I blew Mark's body armor off. Right? Because I'm blind. I was completely blind at this point. And I'm like, I blew his body armor off him. And then I'm like, oh shit, this is the bad guy underneath me. Right? And so I'm kind of laying there, and then I just go blank again. So I don't know what happens there. And then I remember just laying there, and I'm like, I just wanted to go to sleep. I was just like, God, I could. The pain was starting to set in, and I was just like, I just want to go to sleep, And I thought my arm was gone because my arm had got blown out of socket, so it's actually laying against my back, right? I was like, oh man, wow. My arm's gone. I can't breathe. I'm blind, and I just kept telling myself like, who's going to walk your baby girl down the aisle? And I just said, don't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. And during that process, I just literally started having these like very deep visions, very deep memories of my wife and my children. And, like I knew my sons would be fine because my son, I have strong sons. But I was just like, who's going to take care of my baby girl? Who's going to take care of my beloved wife? Like I just was like, you have to stay awake. You have to stay awake. And, that, I think I was going in out of consciousness because I finally, at one point, I heard a voice, right? And for a long time, I thought this voice was God. And I remember the voice just saying, open your eyes, open your eyes, open your eyes, get back in the fight. Open your eyes, get back in the fight. And I'm like, okay, I'm up, I'm awake, right? Well, years later, what I realized that was actually my mom's voice. And so my mom, when I went through, this Mexico therapy, my mom did the best she could. She was a great woman. She worked hard, but she had a hard life, right? We'll just say that. And when she would scold us, she punished us pretty hard. And, she'd knock us around a little bit and she'd get on your feet. Let's fight. Danielle, get on your feet. God damn it. Get in the fight. And it took me a long time to understand I was actually hearing my mom's voice. But yeah, it was I don't know how many minutes it was, but it was a lot of stuff went through my brain, and it was very clear, very like, I could go to sleep right now, but I have to stay awake.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great story. And hearing your mom's voice in that moment, do you think that was some type of alternative consciousness, and we hear so much about like a collective consciousness and things like that. And so I'm just curious as far as your thoughts there. It was just your mind taking over because your body was destroyed. What do you think that was?
Yeah, I've always kind of wondered, how did I make it through SEAL training? Right. So 174 guys in my class started, 14 of us finished.
Wow.
And I always, because I was never some kind of great athlete as a kid. In high school, I had a pretty good athletic career, but it wasn't like I was all American or any of that crap. I was just a dude. I just a dude who wrestled and played ball. Right. And I've always kind of wondered. And then I really started looking at my mom. Right. For years, my mom and I kind of separated. We didn't talk. We had a lot of issues. And then when I came back full circle, I really started getting into the why. What I realized is my mom was this immensely hard worker. Like this story for me is she was actually on a ladder steam cleaning a big, huge freezer at Carnation Food Factory. She fell off the ladder, which caused her to go into labor to have me.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's how far along she was working, right? And everything I remember about my mom is hard. Now, hard loving, obviously, hard punishment, but my mom, that little freaking midget could walk. I mean, and everybody tells me, like, you have power walk. I'm like, bro, my mom could walk so fast and so far, and just never like that woman. I don't ever recall her ever not working. And so I think about that all the time. I'm like, and I tell my daughter, if there was ever going to be a female Navy SEAL, you'd be the first one. And I have to rewind. I'm like, my mom would have been the first one.
Wow.
I am who I am because of my mom, you know? So I think about inner power and inner fortitude and what is actually inside the human soul and the human body, what makes that person. And I'm truly 100% convinced that I have my mother's blood coursing through my veins, and that blood is strong and powerful. And I'm able to now transition from strong and powerful into the spiritual side. That my mom found peace right before her death. She married a very, very good man who took very, very good care of her, and our entire family reconciled. And my mom found her soul at the end, and that's what I'm trying to do, is find my soul.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. Dan, as a SEAL, you're taught to prepare for everything, contingency plans, no matter where you are or what you're doing, and that's so ingrained into like the very fiber of every SEAL and every military personnel, I think. But so I'd love to hear now, as far as your day to day life, what do you always carry with you, as far as like your everyday carry? What type of gear or equipment do you have so that you always feel like you're prepared for anything, no matter what happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. I transitioned from having stuff in my pockets, but
Mhm.
everything's in my backpack. Like I'm an executive. I'm a C-suite executive, but I carry a backpack, and I will always carry a backpack. In my backpack is a small med kit, but Focus Medical. So Rob Hanna makes these really great medical kits. I carry one of those. I carry a tourniquet in there, two tourniquets. There's a bungee tourniquet, then a ratchet tourniquet. Flashlights in there. Um, I have aspirin in there. I have everything that I think, allergy medication. I think that I need to make sure that I can deal with something for an hour, right? Um, I always have a belt, right? So no matter what, I'm always wearing a belt, because where's your first tourniquet? Your belt is always your first tourniquet. So that stuff is how I prepare. It's very hard for me now because I carried a gun since the time I was 20 years old. I carried a gun up until about 2.5 years ago that I stopped working for Sergey. So now I almost feel naked, and I go back and forth to, do I need the gun? Do I carry the gun? And what you learn in executive protection is that your gun is your eyeballs, right? You fight with your eyeballs, because once you pull out a pistol, you've already lost the fight.
Mhm.
Especially for me, the fight, I've already lost it. Whether I win the gunfight, I'm going to lose the court battle. All right. They're going to be like, oh, you're a Navy SEAL, all this training, you're a C-suite executive, you should have, could have, would have. And so it's something I'm becoming more comfortable with, but I do feel naked without it. But in my backpack is everything that I think that I'm going to need, in that little what if situation. And it's not much, flashlight, med kit, tourniquets, aspirin, allergy medication, cough drops, masks, obviously. And it weighs like 30 pounds, so it's only
Mhm.
got like every cable you can think of. But Yeah, and and that stuff is the same stuff that I travel into the woods with. I always have medical equipment.
Mhm.
I will never go in the woods without medical equipment. I'll never go out in the woods without a means to find water. It doesn't mean I carry water with me, but I always have a means to get water. Plastic, even just a trash bag. There's a trash bag in there in case something ever does happen, right?
Mhm.
But those are the things that I have on me all the time. My truck is completely outfitted. There's emergency kits in the truck. All kinds of stuff. I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a prepper, but like any one of my kids pull off the side of the road, they're ready. There's flashlights in there. There's everything they need to get that vehicle in order. Boom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And if you're going to spend an extended period of time in the woods, what additional gear would you always have? And obviously, every
Oh
situation
man,
can be a little different, but just kind of the bare minimum.
the number one thing is a bivy sack and a sleeping pad. I mean, if I go into the woods anytime, there's always a bivy sack and a sleeping bag. I carry my puffy jacket,
Mhm.
right? So my puffy jacket can fold up, but there's nothing that can replace good sleep. Like sleep is everything, and no matter where you are, you're going to have to sleep. And the difference between sleeping like crap or sleeping not like crap is the difference between a ground pad and bivy
Mhm.
sack and a puffy jacket. So those are always with me. I don't carry a beanie hat. I know I'm supposed to, but I sweat. I'm always hot. So when it's cold, I'll carry one. I always have gloves, some kind of glove, but a bivy sack, my puffy jacket, and a ground pad, no matter what, anytime I go in the woods. And that's literally the first thing that I pack.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And obviously, when I talk to former military over the years, and I ask these questions as far as like preparations and what they carry, one of the first things that they always say is it's all up here. It's all in their head, and just having that knowledge. And so that's a skill set that you've been blessed with because of your training. But I'm curious, is some of like the defensive skills that you've learned, like hand-to-hand combat and things like that. I'd like to hear a little bit about that as far as the type of training that you learn and feel like you're super proficient in.
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to be I call it pre-war SEAL. So you have post-war SEALs and you have pre-war SEALs. I was a pre-war SEAL who went into the war. So before the war, we did a system called SCARS. I'll just call it hokey. It was the pretty much the dumbest thing ever invented.
Huh.
It's called autonomic reactions, and we'd go out there and like, completely freaking useless. There was like one move that I learned of, like, say you're at the urinal and you're taking a pee and somebody tries to attack you, you learn to punch in the wiener right next to you. That's about the only thing I learned from SCARS, right? So other than that, completely useless. Once the war started, we started working with Dwayne Dieter, and Dwayne has multiple levels. I don't know the top upper levels. I can tell you that some of the stuff Dwayne teaches, some people can sneer their nose at. I can tell you that one of the drills that he taught me, which is called the hooded box drill, I completely believe saved my life.
Hmm.
Right. And because your blackout hood, the hood comes up and there's 20 situations in front of you. Hood comes down, hood comes up. There's just multiple situations, and that was the only thing that I can completely agree prepared me for Iraq. Because what it does is the hood comes down, hood comes up. You might be in a fight right then and there. Hood comes down, hood comes up. There's a little girl standing there asking for Girl Scout cookies. That's how Iraq was. Afghanistan is totally different. Iraq was you may be in a fight in one room, giving chem lights to little girls in the next room.
Wow.
And then the next room, you're back in a fight. Right. And so that drill, the hooded box drill, was something that um, I just absolutely believe is invaluable. Once we transitioned from Dwayne stuff, then we got into MMA. And we started doing obviously ground fighting and kickboxing, et cetera. And one thing that I was always good at, I was a really good boxer, and obviously coming from wrestling background, I picked up jujitsu really easy. So I would say I don't do the boxing anymore because my hands, I did too much of it, and my knuckles are just gnarled, and
Hmm.
I'll go play at the bag, and for like 2 days, my hands sort of can't type or anything. Jiu-jitsu I stopped doing about a year and a half ago, just because my shoulders are really bad, my elbows are really bad, and I time is very valuable to me. So, but I got really good at it very quickly, because it's jujitsu is chess, right? It's I'm going to set you up. I'm going to move my hips here, my shoulder here to set you up, give you a little bit of chin to try to get you to do something so that I can twist it on you. And I'm kind of a math. I consider myself a mathematician. I'm always 5 moves ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, say you're a better jujitsu practitioner than me, you're in better shape than me. Okay, I'm just going to wait you out, because eventually you're going to get tired. You're going to do something stupid, especially as you subtract years, people get stupider. I hate to say that, but it's the truth, right? The younger a person is, the quicker they are to be petulant. And so that was something that we prided ourselves in. We had our own, we loved to roll. We loved to get on the mats with each other, and it formed some really good relationships. Some guys got really good at it. Jocko, Brian Sargent, he became Chris Gouda became like magicians at jiu-jitsu, right? Like Jocko is a world-class jiu-jitsu practitioner now. And I just loved it. It was great competition and something that I prided myself on being good at. Not the best, but good enough to use it when I needed to use it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's always interesting to me to hear people talk about their martial arts experience and things like that, especially jiu-jitsu, and they don't specify what school or style. I have a little bit of a background in traditional Japanese aikijitsu and samurai jiu-jitsu. And so when you hear people today, it seems like they're speaking specifically about Brazilian. And so it's always interesting, the dichotomy there and the difference between those two styles and everything. So yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it's because, for overseas, as soon as you get in a hand-to-hand fight, you're going to the ground. And you're going to the ground with a tremendous amount of gear on. And so I've been in those situations where I've been on top and I've been on bottom, and learning when like people ask me about mental toughness. How do you build mental toughness? You got to do mentally tough things over and over again until it becomes normal. Well, same with fighting. The more you are on top, on bottom, on your side, hundreds and hundreds of times, the more comfortable you get being in that position, and therefore you're not going to panic. And so jiu-jitsu, obviously, with gi, no gi, that's gym jiu-jitsu. What we did was combat jiu-jitsu of how do I break this human being quickly and defeat him or eliminate him fast in the most violent fashion that I can do it without hurting myself. That's the jiu-jitsu we practiced. Obviously, we didn't practice on each other, but when you have that mentality of, I'm not here to get a belt. I'm not a Gracie. I'm not I don't even know those schools. I didn't have any money when I was in the team, so I couldn't go to a club. And I couldn't afford the belt anyway. So it was, I'm here to destroy you.
Sure. Yeah, that definitely sounds more like the Japanese mentality of like kind of that battlefield art than more like the competition level. Dan, so I always like to ask guests what companies that they see are doing just a great job. Like whether that's an outdoor company, a gear company, brands that are doing a great job as far as the quality of the products that they're putting out, their environmental stances, the things that they're doing for conservation, and all of that surrounding kind of outlook. Do you have any company or brand that you really like?
I like certain gear, but as far as like the company standpoints and stuff, I've done I wouldn't know if it's a good job or a bad job. I've done my best to kind of stay out of like a company philosophy. Like I'm working with a Fortune 100 company right now, and they're a very liberal company. So it's kind of the first time I'm being like, what I'm doing is having to match what their company ethos are. When it comes to gear, I liked good gear. So I never really got into who made it, how they made it. I knew what crap gear was, and I knew what good gear was, right? Like the last gear company we were sponsored by was Black Diamond. And so, almost all my new stuff is all Black Diamond, but I love Marmot. I love North Face. I'm a big Patagonia guy. Almost everything I have is Patagonia because that's what I got issued.
Great quality.
And the fact that I got issued in like 2003 and I still have it and it still works.
Yeah.
Just kind of, of what I did with it, right? Like I still have the jacket that I got blown up in, and I still wear it. I just sewed it up,
Wow.
So it was good stuff.
Yeah, that's incredible. Dan, what book or books have had the biggest impact on your life?
That one I almost said the wrong book. I like history books. I read a lot of history. I think when we were young, we were soldiers once and young. I've read Jocko's book, Extreme Accountability, Extreme Ownership. I enjoyed that one. It kind of clarified things that I was thinking. And I hate to read books by other SEALs. It's just kind of a taboo of, it brings back memories that I sometimes don't feel like bringing back. And, I don't want to give them any money anyway. So, there's a book I just read by Warren Buffett of financial success. Not his, but a book he recommended. I don't have it. It's in my office. Let me look at the name real quick. I've read it twice, and I'm terrible. That's happens to get blown up too. You lose a lot of your memory, your short-term memory. So the book is called The Intelligent Investor.
Okay.
And my degree is in finance, and so I've always been very interested in the market and the money, but I'm not smart enough to know it to the level of experts. And that book really breaks it down to like the stay-at-home dad investor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who's just trying to put some money away in retirement, not trying to get rich, just make sure that he's not going to be dependent on Social Security when he's older. And so I like that book a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have a favorite podcast?
Obviously, Joe Rogan. I do a lot of work with Joe. So I like Joe because Joe's a dude. He's just a dude, man. He says it how it is. He understands that what he says could make waves and ripples, but he's brave enough to speak the truth and powerful enough to question the lies. And I respect that. I listen to Mike Ritland's podcast when certain guests are on because Mike's my bro. Andy Stump when certain guests are on. So I think probably the podcast that I'm on, I start listening to. If I'll start listening to yours, I listened to yours the other day to kind of get an idea, but it always comes down to subject, who is this person and do I feel like hearing about them type thing, and there's some subjects that, like gun podcasts, I have no desire to listen to whatsoever. I own a lot of guns, but I'm not a gun guy. I shoot what they put in my hands, and that was as much about I know of as guns. So there's some subject politics. I just won't do it. I just like talk. I like podcasts where people just flowing, man. They're talking, So those are the ones that interest me.
Yeah.
And usually I don't ever search for them. Somebody just sends like, oh man, you should listen to this. I'm like, okay, I'll listen.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Dan, what's one piece of advice that you would give to our audience?
Start your morning out with a routine and a strict, unflappable routine. And so my routine sets the tone for my day, and I do the same thing every single day. And it's an exacting routine that when I break that routine, my day is kind of chaos. I believe in two things: control and chaos, right? Some people say control is illusion, but it doesn't mean you can't try. But chaos is not an illusion. And so my routine is when I wake up in the morning, I do not use an alarm clock. I wake up to the sunrise, and first thing I do is I just kind of lay there and I hold my wife. And I don't have a set time frame. She's sleeping. It makes me understand of what I'm doing and what I love. And I just sit there and I just kind of watch her sleep. I get up, go do my business. I read my paper while I'm doing my business. The only time I really kind of get on the phone is that for that kind of stuff. And I don't do social media in the morning. I just get on the paper and I just read business. I read sports or read something, just whatever news is out there. And I go work out. So I go ride my bike, and then I'll lift. And then the final part of that part is three final parts is by then my wife is up. Usually she joins me working out. We make our tea and we go sit on our deck and we just drink our tea on our deck very quietly. That is probably the most important part of my day, is just being able to sit on my deck with my wife. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't talk, and just kind of enjoying nature. And then I go to work, and the final, obviously I cruise control work, but the final part of my day is something I think is probably the best piece of advice. If I was going to give you any advice, is I say two things to myself when I pull in the parking lot of my office. One, my problems are not their problems. And I say it to myself twice. My problems are not their problems. Two, make 7 people smile. And I say it to myself twice. Make 7 people smile. And then I go to work. And then the final part, is hard. The hardest for me to do is when I come home, I do my buddy Tom Shea. He writes a good book. I basically try to do what he has, some wisdom he's imparted on me is 10, 10, 10. 10 minutes for her, 10 minutes for me, 10 minutes of intimacy. And so when I come home, she'll, first thing is, how was your day? How was your day? Tell me something about your day. And I want her to talk, and I want her to, and I ask random questions like, what is your favorite flower? Like how, just questions that I didn't know the answer to. And really it's telling me that work is not important. Work is over. I am home now. I'm a father. I'm a husband. and I am not a worker. I'm very, very strict about that. I do not come home and work, right? Work is work, home is home. And then I tell her, what she'll ask, how was your day? And what I don't do when I tell her about that is I don't talk about my work day. I tell her a funny story, a conversation, what I ate for lunch, just anything but work. And then the next 10 minutes, we just kind of spend time with each other. I just make sure that she knows that right in that moment, she's the most important person in my life. And I really preach to when I teach leadership and stuff like that and communication, I really teach what's called front sight focus. And I am absolutely into this conversation right now. There are no distractions. I'm not looking at my phone. I am in this moment right now. And that 10 minutes of intimacy, that is part of it. There is nothing going to come into this moment between you and me and my beloved. And so there's probably 27 pieces of advice, but it's a routine. And that routine is absolute. And the days that I break that routine are days that are not good days for me. And I'd say I have 350 great days a year now, and 6 bad, right? Whereas I used to have 6 good and 350 bad. So,
wow, that's phenomenal advice. I've been taking lots of notes here. This is great. Dan, thank you so much. I really appreciate our time today. This has been a fantastic interview, and I think that our audience is really going to gain a lot of wisdom and insight and hopefully some great life lessons. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Oh man, I really appreciate having me on. I enjoy good conversations. I enjoy good people, and I had fun. It was fun. It was very relaxing. Thank you for allowing me to just be relaxed. So,
of course, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Rewild Gear Podcast. You could check out the show notes for today's episode at rewildgearpodcast.com. If you're ready to spend more time in the wild, our line of high-quality, minimalistic outdoor gear can help you do just that. Check us out at rewildgear.com.